Hi BookTube! I am here today to talk about why we need diversity in books. Recently on BookTube there has been some discussion and some people say that they don't want diversity in books and they think that it divides us. And I would like to respond to them and to the community at large with my own reasons why I think that diversity is so important. So first, though, what I should do is define diversity so that we're all on the same path. And the way that I define diversity is inclusion of people from all different kinds of backgrounds and all different kinds of childhoods and experiences. So a lot of that is people with including people of color in books, and that includes not just as characters but also as authors and people with different ethnicities, but that's not all that it is. It also includes people of different socioeconomic backgrounds, people from different cultures, people from different people who have different religious values, and people who have different people who have different health stations, things like that. People, the point is that getting a difference of perspective and a lot, and that can come from a variety of different areas. Now, the most common claim for why we shouldn't include diversity in books, and I'm going to speak specifically about books because that's the media that I consume most often, and this is BookTube, and the most common claim is that diversity divides us instead of unites us, and that there's far more that unites us instead of divides us. And that is true, that ultimately there is much more that unites humans than that divides us. Like, your sexuality does not define you. Your race does not define you. But ultimately, we have to be honest, because if you say that you are going to ignore whether or not an author is heterosexual or ignore whether or not they're white, let's be honest, we have ignored that, and for this long, we've had white, heterosexual, cisgender authors, and from a pretty similar economic backgrounds as well. And the thing is, and that's not to say that people who publish, that's not to say that Charles Dickens isn't a good author, that's not to say that Stephen King isn't a good author, it's not to diminish their own accomplishments, it's to say that there is a systemic problem with the publishing industry and that we need to demand accountability to give here so that all voices can be heard. If you look at the statistics, if you look at the statistics for who's publishing books and for who's submitting books and for who the characters are, the answer is that the characters and the authors are overwhelmingly white and overwhelmingly middle class and overwhelmingly heterosexual. And again, there isn't anything wrong with being those things. Like, there isn't any, but we want our books to reflect the society that we live in. And for a lot of people, that's not who they are. And I just want to say, so for 2016, I set a goal for myself that I was going to read at least 25% of books by authors who were of color, and this could mean anyone who wasn't white. And on some extent, I was going to have to guess because people don't like advertise their race. But sometimes you can figure it out if you can tell their country of origin. And the thing is that if you think it's embarrassing to go back and to look at your statistics and to look at what you've read over the past year and count how many authors have you read who were non-heterosexual or were not of color. And the thing is that I have had to make a conscious effort to read 25% non-white authors, and 25% is nothing. But without it, I read 95% and a lot of people who are playing devil's advocate would say, you know, Janelle, why do we have to make a conscious effort? Shouldn't we just let the best books float to the top and read what we want to read? Why do we have to make an effort to seek out people based on their race? And I would say the reason why we have to do that, we have to make an effort because for so long, and still in our modern day society, an effort has been made to keep those authors out of the publishing industry and to keep those authors out of media. And so that's why you have to go out of your way to seek to find books written by Black authors. You have to. And some people could say that's reverse racism, but that's the reality. And if you think that you read, a wide spectrum, just run the numbers. Just look at the statistics of what you read. Because I thought that I read widely, and I read like 8% by authors of color, and that's Black authors, that's Hispanic authors, that's international authors, that's Asian authors, and it was 8%, and that's abysmal. And I don't want to say, and obviously, having authors of color and reading by authors of color is not the entire experience. Like, that's not everything. Like, for example, one book that I read this year was Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, which is about how in America and in Canada, but primarily in America, it was about the Native history of how Native Americans were pushed off their lands either forcibly or through unethical treaties that the United States cheated them on, and pushed off their land and onto their reservations. And the giant shove that really transformed the West from belonging to the natives, from belonging to the Americans. And it was a wonderful book. And it was incredible. But that book was written by a white man. But so that book is part of the 75% of books that I read that were written by white people. On the other hand, I enjoy the Outlander series by Diana Gabaldon. And the Outlander series is about a woman who travels back through time, back to 18th century Scotland, and the adventures that ensue. And I enjoy that series as well. Diana Gabaldon is of Mexican-American heritage. And so that counts towards my 25% people of color. So, but even though race isn't a prominent theme. So what I want to say is, like, obviously, like, reading books by authors of color is not like the end all be all. Like, there's obviously nuance here. But I will say that it is incredibly important, and it's part of the experience. It's part of making an effort to reach out and find the people who have been shut out of our society for so long. Some of the other claims that have been made are that diversity isn't natural, because throughout long periods of human history, we were not diverse, and that people of all races feared people of different races, and that they persecuted them. And that's true. I mean, that's true. We are all innately racist. And, psychologists have proven this over and over again. But that's why we have to make a deliberate effort to not be racist, because it's ingrained in us to trust people who look like us. And not only is that a fallacy that can get us killed, that is also it also can perpetuate stereotypes and can hurt people. So, and the thing is, as far as, like, are other countries racist and things like that, which has also been brought up, like, we can only take responsibility for our own culture. I am an American, and I can only take responsibility for my own culture and try to change my own culture, because that's the one that I know. I can't tell women in Saudi Arabia to liberate themselves, because I don't know their experience. They have to realize what they need for themselves and then fight for it. But I can't come in and say, you need to do this. We need to take responsibility for our own culture. And in Western culture, in sort of Western Europe and Western North America, we have to be honest that race is a huge issue, and that we are very far from racial equality. And it's not racist to say it's not racist or reverse racist or whatever to say that we have to seek out authors of color. It's not, because you can't. Some of the other claims include people saying, or this one particular booktuber who says that she doesn't care what your race is or what your sexuality is. What matters is what's on the inside. And that's obviously true, okay? Like, I'm not going to say that race is the end-all be-all, because it's not. But the thing is that we can't pretend like a black author and a white author have equal chances of being published, because they don't. And the thing is, part of that is systemic, and part of that is overt racism, and like, one isn't worse than the other, it's just they're different. And the thing is, and you have to look at the statistics, because if you look at the statistics of black authors in sci-fi, for example, they're abysmal, absolutely abysmal. And the answer isn't that there aren't less black writers. The answer is that they're being published much less frequently. The statistics don't lie. Like, we can't ignore that this is a problem, and we can't claim that we don't notice race, because we do, and we inherently favor white people. And I'm saying this as a white person, and I feel like it's my duty to speak out against this. Like, I can't just say that this isn't I can't pretend like everything's hunky-dory, because it isn't. And it affects all of us. It does. Like, we have to make an active effort to not be racist, because we are all inherently racist. And so, yes, looking at the statistics of what you read, or looking at the statistics of the books that are published every year from each publishing house, can show you inherently if you're intrinsically making those decisions or not. Like, if you I mean, it's ridiculous, but I'm gonna look back down at my notes. I'm also drinking green tea today, which is lovely. We need to overcome this assumption that white is the default, because like, we assume that white is default, and that can be and that shows itself in many different things. We'll have a futuristic dystopian society, and the characters will all be white. And if that book is made into a movie, and that movie he casts some people, and they cast a person of color as one of the characters who's never specified to be white, people will be outraged, because and the reason why we have to actively ask publishers is because, again, not only if you look at the statistics of the publishing industry will you see that there is racism inherently, but some of the claims that have been made are that at no point when you submit a query letter and when you approach a publishing house asking to be published, do they ask for your race. And that's true, presumably. I haven't interacted with all publishing houses. But the thing is, they don't need to ask for your race for it to be inherently racist. The thing is that often, we know from psychological studies that people who have if a man applies for a man with an identical resume applies for a job and his name is Jose Lopez versus his name being John Smith, Jose Lopez is less likely to get the job. There's ways to tell from your surname and from your primary name what ethnicity you are, and we inherently distrust those people. Similarly with women, if you have Jane Smith and John Smith with identical resumes, Jane Smith is less likely to get the job, and it's because we inherently trust women less, and that is a systemic problem. There doesn't have to be a conscious moment of a publisher saying this author is black. No, although that can happen. And part of that, too, is marketability. People think that white people won't want to read books written by black authors. And we need to say that that's not true and demand it. Publishing industries are companies. They're setting out to make money. So we have to say, yes, we have to go and we have to buy books written by people of color, and we have to actively find books that are written by them. We have to demand diversity. It's incredibly important. And I mean, I just don't understand why I even have to make a video like this. Well, I do understand, but it kind of appalls me, the fact that I do. Um, for people who say that it doesn't matter, okay, have you read a book that was written 100 years ago, or have you watched a movie that was filmed 50 years ago and cringed at some of the stereotypes? Have you? Because I have. And the thing is, you can tell by the media that that culture produces what their inherent biases are and what their inherent values are. The fact that that movies until relatively recently couldn't show autonomous, well-developed female characters is a sign that society hadn't become egalitarian yet, and that the feminist movement isn't over. The fact that the fact that there's far fewer opportunities for people of color in acting and in the movie making business, and the fact that when they do, they're often relegated to stereotypes, like, that's huge. That says something about our society. And yeah, and people can argue why is this important. Well, you could have said the same thing 100 years ago about why it was important to allow women authors to come onto the scene. We need an environment where all types of stories are celebrated, and that you can judge a story not based off of like the background or the environment that the character is in, but in how well written the story is, and where it's not I mean we all know the story about how J.K. Rowling she had to go with her first two initials because her publishers thought that young boys wouldn't want to read a children's book written by a woman. And that's why we need to seek out books by female authors, why we did for so long. And now that that's finally coming to a much more equilibrium, we need to start demanding that of authors of color. That we need to start demanding that we have characters of color, and that we have that authors of color are being published. It's because publishing houses inherently censor them because they think that they won't sell. And part of that isn't just publishing houses. Part of that too is the institutional racism that people face, that people of color face, and there's like a whole load of reasons why that a sociologist can dig into like why we have far more white authors than we do people of color, and part of that has to do with, like, at least in America, I can only speak about America, the inequality in our school systems and socioeconomic inequality, which disproportionately affects people of color than it does white Americans, and all of that is a contributing factor, and that's something that Book 2 can't really fix right now. But what we can do is demand diversity, and we can support diverse authors, and that means buying books by diverse authors when they're published, and that means like looking at your reading goals and saying, what am I actually reading? How much? Like, I think I'm probably reading far more white authors than I think that I am. So again, sociological studies have shown that we tend to overestimate the number of minorities in any given group. They've done this with like women in engineering. There'll be like 2 women in a room and people will estimate that the room is like 35% women. They've done this with people of color. There'll be 2 black people in the room and people will estimate that the room is 50% black. It's incredibly disproportionate. And so look at your numbers. I really challenge you to, because it can be shocking, and you can have a different reading books by people who have different experiences than you is incredibly important. It's about listening to people's voices. It's about we need to call for an artistic community that celebrates people of all experiences and that wants people from all backgrounds to write about those experiences so that we can all enjoy them. Okay. Something else that I want to address is the claim that that a person's sexuality, whether that be a character or an author's, their sexuality or their race or their ethnicity doesn't matter. And this is something that I heard in the video that's been going around BookTube. And I would like to say that, I mean, it does matter. We should be in an ideal society where it doesn't matter. But that reminded me of something that I had read this year, and it was written by the author Maracle. She wrote "I Am Woman: Native Perspectives on Feminism and Sociology," and I filmed a book review for that, and I'll leave the link down below if you're interested in watching it. And it was about a Native American woman commenting on Can America and her experiences with Can America. And she says that something that she hears all the time is, why can't we all just get along? Why do we have to acknowledge race anymore? And what she said is, when she hears that, she hears, you don't want our races to actually merge and you don't want our cultures to fuse. What you want is for us to start acting like white people. So when you say, I don't care about what your race is, what you really mean is that we all need to go around acting like white, heterosexual, cisgender men. And that you can't bring any of your culture or any of your experiences that have helped define who you are to the table. And yes, your race is not the majority of who you are, nor your ethnicity, nor your sexuality, nor your economic background. But to say that you can't talk about those experiences because it makes people uncomfortable is discriminatory. We need to have an artistic community where we can talk about these things and where we can celebrate people talking about their stories, and where these stories can come from all ends of the spectrum, and from every walk of life. And this is important because media defines our society's normalcy. We can see what each society valued based off of the media that they consumed and that they enjoyed and that they engineered. And we want our society to be one of equality, and we want, and that's why diversity is important. And yes, it is going to be, I'm going to end this pretty soon because this video is getting quite long, but I would like to say that, the solution isn't to just throw in random people of color into books that, and I would like to leave, because the solution is much more complex. The solution is about creating realistic characters who have experiences that are relevant to their own cultural background and can't just be used as like a mascot to prove that you're not racist, or that you're not homophobic. But I would like to end with with something that George R.R. Martin said, and he is the author of A Song of Ice and Fire series. If you hadn't read, he writes a lot of diverse characters who have different economic backgrounds and sexualities and racial backgrounds and ethnicities. And he's also been praised for his incredibly well-developed female characters, and for how well-developed his characters are, even when they're disabled or even when they're from completely different backgrounds from him. And he is a white man in America. And what he said is, when asked how does he do this, is he said, you have to remember that they're people first. And that's it. You have to remember that these are people who are just like you, and you can't forget that they had this different experience. But I think that as writers and as readers, we need to remember that. Okay, this is a long video, and hopefully someone got something out of it. Thank you all for watching, and yeah, hopefully something will change. I don't know if it will, but I thought I needed to say something about the situation that was going on. Thank you, BookTube.